Hello and welcome back. For those of you who've been listening, we appreciate you coming back. If you're new to to our YouTube channel or our podcast, well, hey, welcome. We're glad to hear you. My name's Rob Nuttleman. I am an employment attorney, mediator, and public speaker. We've been talking about communication and ways to improve that communication and different skills. The last time we talked about setting goals and the importance of knowing what we want to do. And we talked about what has worked and has not worked in the past. Let's think about those things before we go into the conversation so we can know what we need to do. This time, we're going to do a little bit more of a deeper dive into that self-evaluation, really ask some pertinent questions about what are our intentions, where are we emotionally, et cetera, and how do we want the conversation to be? Like, who do we want to be in that conversation? Before we dive in, hopefully you got your cup of coffee, take a sip, and we'll get right to it. So, before going into a difficult conversation, it's important to evaluate where you are. Are you ready for that conversation? What's your emotional temperature? Are you in a place where you're going to be able to be receptive and responsive, but not reactive? On a scale of 1 to 10, how angry, how upset, how stressed am I? Going into a conversation when you're stressed is going to add difficulty to that conversation because the person you're communicating with is going to pick up on that. And again, their response is typically going to be a defensive one. So before I go into that conversation, maybe we just take some minutes, some hours, or some days until we're at until our emotional temperature is at a level that's going to enable us to be the best version of who we are and allow us to communicate most effectively. How are we physically? Am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Am I tired? Am I exhausted? Any of those things. Some of those are curable. If I'm hungry, get some blood sugar, get some food into me so I'm not going into that conversation weakened or in a state, my own state of distress. If I'm tired, did I get enough sleep last night? Have I gotten enough sleep the last few nights? Feel how that physical state is. It's also important to do a bias check. Am I going into this conversation with preconceived notions of what's going to happen or what's not going to happen? We all have biases. We have biases every day. They impact every conversation, every move we make, some conscious, some unconscious. The more we can be aware of those biases, the more we don't need to let those biases rule what our decision-making process is. Um, I might picture the person I'm speaking with as, oh, this person's always grumpy. And so I'm going to be more uh, hesitant about how I want to approach it or think about how I'm going to approach it. Just acknowledging that, hey, that's my perspective. I may be accurate. My bias may not be accurate, but just acknowledging that I have that bias can allow me to say, okay, whether that's true or not, how is that going to impact who I'm going to be in this conversation? We also want to test what is our emotional bandwidth right now? What's our capacity to be able to have this conversation? If I'm overwhelmed, I've got 15 different projects, 3 of which are late, and now to pile onto this, I'm going to have this difficult conversation. Maybe I need to get to a place where I have more capacity to have this conversation. I don't want to use that as an excuse to never have the conversation because we are, for the most part, very busy. A lot of us are out there. We've got work, family, school, all these different things pulling at us from different directions, and we can oftentimes feel busy. If we're feeling that we're at the point where we can't take any more, that's probably not the best time to go into a conversation that we know is going to be difficult. So we're going to be doing this pre-conversation, self-evaluation of where we are emotionally, physically, intellectually. Are we ready to have this conversation? If we feel yes, we are, then we can proceed to what that conversation is going to be. I had a business coach that taught me this technique years ago about think about who do I want to be in this conversation. Let's say I was going to be having a conversation, or I was planning to call a client with some bad news. If I didn't think about who I wanted to be in that conversation, I might go into that conversation with a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear. If prior to that conversation, I thought, okay, well, I'm an attorney, I'm a professional, I'm knowledgeable. This person has hired me to give them advice. Whether that advice was going to make them happy or not, it's important, but they're not hiring me to make them happy necessarily. They're hiring me to give them advice. And so think about, well, what do I think a professional is going to look like? And then that's how I'm going to act. Help me frame myself for that conversation. What are my values and how are my values going to determine my behavior? Because the way I'm perceiving it, the way I'm perceiving myself is going to impact how I'm going to be in that conversation. Another way to look at it is, it's kind of the mirror test. When I hang up that phone, when I leave that room, if I go and I look in a mirror, am I going to like who I was in that conversation? Let's pre-plan that out. What is going to enable me to look in that mirror after the conversation and say, yes, I liked who I was in that conversation. Even if the conversation went sideways, even if it went exactly how I planned it, even if it went off the rails, did I act and behave in the manner that I feel was the best Rob I could be? Thinking from a value-based framework, what are your values? And we all may have some shared values, things like integrity, transparency, patience, respect. You may have your own specific ones: honesty, accountability, compassion. Um, I keep thinking about the scout oath. I'm a assistant scoutmaster for a local troop, and it's all about trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind. All these different concepts. And every scout meeting, we open with the scout oath and the scout law, where we talk about and we say, a scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly. What if you were to have that little self-talk before you make that phone call? And then actually think about those words, or just pick one word that exemplifies who you want to be in this conversation. I want to be the professional. I want to be the compassionate listener. I want to be the person who has to break some bad news to somebody in a way that feels compassionate. I want to be helpful. I want to be the teacher. I want to be the respected mentor. I want to be the friend. What role do I want to play in that conversation? And what are my value-based perspectives? Because that's going to gear my response framework. If I'm coming, if I know what my goal is as far as who I want to be, what are the values that I want to exemplify, then it's easier for me to stick to that script or to be that person in the conversation. So many times we just jump into the conversation without much forethought. We might have our bullet points of what we want to say. Where's the bullet points about who we want to be in that conversation? Who we want to be in the conversation oftentimes is as important, if not more important, than what we actually say in that conversation. So think of a professional or a person that you deeply respect. How would that person handle this conversation? If they were in here and they were having the conversation with the person, what would they say? What would they do? What would their body movements be like? And then emulate that. Walk it out in your mind, think it through, and be that person. At the end of the conversation, can you ask yourself, am I living up to that standard that I set? I set the standard for who I want to be in this conversation. Can I live up to that? did I live up to that conversation? You have it within you to do it because you're the one who gets to set the values. You're the one who gets to decide who do I want to be in that conversation. Do that self evaluation before you go into the conversation. Are you psychologically, physically, mentally, emotionally ready for the conversation? And if so, then who do you want to be in that conversation? How do you want to approach it? What are the values that you want to exemplify in that conversation? That's going to ground you and allow you to maintain a good equilibrium where you're being active, not reactive in the conversation. Try these out on a couple different conversations, difficult conversations you might be having with family members, with friends, colleagues, coworkers, your boss, your subordinates. See how those go. Next time, we're going to talk about setting boundaries. And I love the conversation about setting boundaries because it's a difficult one. It's one that we always have to work on. We're going to talk about setting boundaries for ourselves, setting boundaries for other people, and setting boundaries for conversations. So enjoy your cup of coffee today. Have a great day. I look forward to talking to you next time.